You got everything you need?
I never went out with this group before. I hear all about the meeting.
Oh, there you go.
All right.
You ready, Roxanne?
Yeah, we're ready now.
Lori, are you ready?
Yeah,
I would love that.
Guys, ready?
Okay, let's go.
All right. This is the special meeting of the Park District of Highland Park, which I call to order at 6:05 p.m. Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein.
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flores-Weisskopf. Here. Vice President Ruttenberg.
Here.
President Kaplan.
Absent. All right, we apologize. President Kaplan will not be present for tonight's meeting due to employment purposes, but he is available by phone. According to our policy, Section 2.06.4, the Park Board Commissioners may participate in board meetings by electronic means only by a vote of quorum of all sitting members of the board who are physically present. All votes shall be taken by a roll call. Is there a motion to allow President Kaplan to participate by phone for tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Aye.
Flores-Weisskopf. Aye. Vice President Ruttenberg.
Aye. The motion is carried. We'll wait until he comes on the phone.
Hello, Brian Kaplan. Can you hear us all? You are now live in the special meeting for the Park District of Highland Park.
And let the record reflect that I do recognize his voice.
All right.
Can you read your phone for us?
Good, thank you. All right. We will now go to a public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Park Commissioners to sell not to exceed $7,250,000 of general obligation park bonds for park improvements and for the payment of the expenses incident thereto. I'm reading the notes. A public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Park Commissioners to sell not to exceed $7,250,000 of general obligation park bonds for park improvements and for the payment of the expenses incident thereto for the Park District of Highland Park is now in session. Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein.
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flores-Weisskopf.
Here.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
I am here.
President Kaplan.
Good.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the Park Board of Commissioners who wish to comment on this issuance of the bonds?
I'll just make a quick comment that we have discussed this over the last several months regarding this bond issue. This is part of our funding models in order to fund ongoing green projects and also capital improvements. So it's a recommendation of the Finance Committee that we move forward with these bonds.
Thank you. Executive Director Romes, are you aware of any written communications that were received related to the Park District's issuance of general obligation park bonds?
I am not aware of any written communication.
Are there any citizens in attendance that would like to comment? Let the record show that no one has stepped forward. Please note that if any written or oral testimony is provided during the hearing, the board is not obligated to respond to any such testimony, only if they desire to speak. After the final speaker, and there are none, let the record show that there were no members of the community or Board of Commissioners who have chosen to speak on this issue.
Except for me.
When all of the above have been addressed, call for a motion and second.
Okay. Move for approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
That is a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Move to adjourn the public hearing. I got ahead of myself.
Okay. And I'll second
Second.
that.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If none, Roxanne, please call the roll.
Commissioner Bernstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Flores-Weisskopf.
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Aye.
President Kaplan.
All right, the motion is carried, and the public hearing is adjourned. So, are there any additions to the agenda from the commissioners or from staff? Hearing none. Is there any public comment for items on the agenda? Hearing
Do
none.
we have to take formal action on the bonds, or
No.
It comes,
no? Oh, okay. Nice job. You did a fabulous job tonight. Hey, you did a fabulous job.
Flawless.
Ready for
The
commissioners.
best consultant expert we've ever had before us.
So we move into new business. Park grant resolution of authorization. Jeff Smith to present.
Yeah, just. Yeah, don't worry.
Hello. So, as the board's aware, staff are currently in the process of assembling the grant application for the park grant for the Centennial Ice Arena renovation project. As part of that application, there is a resolution of authorization that's required to be approved by the organization's board. And so that form has been included in the board packet, and I'll just briefly describe the purpose of the form. It is to acknowledge that the organization has the adequate funds to complete the project, and also acknowledge that we would follow all terms and conditions of the grant if awarded the project. And lastly, if we fail to complete the project within the specified timeline, or also we're not able to complete the project because we did not have the adequate funding, then it would essentially bar us from applying for a grant for the next 2 cycles. That's it. Any questions about it?
Does anybody have any questions? Lori?
When do they select or announce who the recipients?
We do not know. So the applications are going to be due next week, and then it could be a number of months. We're thinking summer, early summer, but we're not sure.
Yeah. I have a question. Cal, you were able to handle this with Amalia being out?
I'll let you know tomorrow.
Okay.
Hold on a second, Brian. Brian Kaplan, you have a question.
Hi, Jeff. I didn't hear how long we couldn't apply for another grant if we cannot
Yeah, here,
for the obligation.
I'll read the language right here. It says, failure to adhere to the specified project timeline or failure to proceed with the project because of insufficient funds or change in local recreation priorities is sufficient cause for the project grant termination, which will also result in an ineligibility of the local project sponsor for subsequent Illinois DNR indoor or outdoor recreation grant assistance consideration in the next 2 consecutive grant cycles following the project termination.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Brian, do we have anything that we want to talk about? All right. Is there a motion to approve the park grant resolution of authorization?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf? Vice President Ruttenberg?
Yes.
President Kaplan?
Yes.
All right. The motion passes. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
We will now open to the public to address the board. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the board? Let the record show that there is none. Brian, is there any reason to go into closed session?
Nope.
All right. Skip that.
Motion for adjournment.
Yes, we'll go to a motion for adjournment of the special meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Was there any, did we do, from the public, things not on the agenda?
Well, we have a regular agenda coming.
Okay. All right, move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. We are adjourned at 6:14.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Where are you guys going?
Brian?
meeting?
Yes.
Can we see you at 6:30?
Back.
Careful walking down these stairs.
Thanks, Brian.
So the regular meeting starts at 6:30. That was the posted time.
Yes.
Yes.
So we have 15 minutes.
15 minutes to idly sit here and
Look at each other awkwardly.
I think Brian is off. Shot meeting of the Park District at 30 p.m. Roxanne, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein.
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flor Weisskopf.
Here.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Here.
President Kaplan.
I'm here as well. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, let's start with the Park Avenue update. Brian Romes to present.
Thanks, Brian. At the December 12th regular Park Board meeting, the Park Board directed staff to work with community stakeholders on addressing potential site improvements at Park Avenue building facility. Park Board Commissioners Kel Bernstein and Park Board Vice President Barney Rottenberg were assigned as board liaisons to this Park Avenue working group. The working group met for the first time on Monday, December 16th, at which point we established the group's purpose and some stated objectives. Meeting participants included Park District and city staff, the Park Board liaisons, as well as City Council liaisons Tony Bloomberg and Adam Stolberg, and the North Shore Yacht Club Commodore, Laura Knapp, as well as numerous members from the public. The Park Avenue Working Group stated purpose is to seek feasible options that provide long-term access to boating activities at Park Avenue Boating Facility. The objectives that were discussed during the initial meeting were as follows. The first objective is to provide education on lakefront conditions and associated risks at Park Avenue. That meeting was held today at 4 p.m. And coastal engineering firm Smith Group presented up-to-date information on Lake Michigan water levels, explained the different proposed concepts for the barge breakwater repair or replacement, and reviewed a site analysis that helped explain the risks associated with the activities and shoreline protection at Park Avenue. Our second objective will be accomplished at the next meeting, which is Wednesday, January 29th at 8 a.m., and that one is to evaluate what we learned today and to discuss it at length with the hope that we will gain consensus on a recommendation that will eventually be brought to the Park District's Finance Committee. Which brings us to the third objective, is to explore fiscally responsible funding options to support the recommended priority site improvement projects, which will be then discussed at our February or March Finance Committee meetings. And then finally, eventually, the hope of the working group is to provide a recommendation to the Park Board, which will include a recommendation for site improvements as well as some scenarios for funding options. That is hoped to be done around April. With that said, the Park Avenue Working Group is hoping to continue to have the support and the consensus of the Park Board, consistent with the Park District's mission and board-approved policies, to continue working with the Park Avenue Working Group on seeking fiscally responsible site improvements that provide long-term access to boating activities at Park Avenue Boating Facility. So if there are not any questions, or if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time. Okay. So then really, I think what staff and I think what the working group was looking for is just consensus to keep moving forward in the manner of which I just described.
I have no problem with that. Does anybody have any objection to that?
Strongly encourage it.
I would just add is that we were lucky to spend an hour and a half this afternoon with Margaret talking about which I'm sure we're going to hear some information about that coming up about with Rosewood under the Rosewood Beach update. I'm hearing about lake levels and how that's impacting the beaches, just in not just in Highland Park, but throughout the entire Lake Michigan basin. In addition, we went through 10 different concept plans with regard to what can be done. In fact, actually, there was 11, because the 11th was, what if we do nothing? And she didn't prepare that one, so that was my question. So the members who were there, I thought that it was a very productive meeting, and we look forward to, at this point, the idea is for us to digest. We received a lot of information today, to digest it, think about it, come back on January 29th prepared to discuss the different concepts, hopefully then we can try to coalesce around one or two or three of them that we can then bring to the Finance Committee to discuss how we go about creating funding models to implement that. So the good news is what we heard today, and Margaret can repeat this later, is that there's no imminent threat right now to boating at Park Avenue. Under the existing conditions, the barge, even under high lake levels, can last. I promised her I would not quote her years, but it could quote her to the immediate future that the boating can continue as currently situated as we work out trying to find a solution. And if the lake levels go down, we buy ourselves more time besides that. So again, a very productive meeting, and I look forward to meeting with the group on January 29th.
Thank you. Okay, before we move on, I've been handed a list of speakers, 10. Is everybody here who wants to speaking on Park Avenue Beach? Or I guess I should ask it another way. Is anybody who signed up to speak want to speak on something that's not Park Avenue Beach?
Brian, just have one more comment. I would suggest speaking into the microphone.
Sorry. My speakerphone's too far away.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I'll start again. Does everybody here who signed up to speak want to speak on Park Avenue? Hearing that, I'm going to go out of order if no commissioner has an objection, and have the speakers now after Park Avenue, and then you can stay for the rest of the meeting if you so choose. So let's start with Michael Strohs.
Michael Strohs, 580 Hillside Drive, Highland Park. I signed up because I've been absent for quite some time. I've missed you all. Happy New Year. I was concerned from the land of the desert where there is no water at the lack of action on the barge, but I'm told by people that are in the know that positive moves have happened in the last couple of hours, days, weeks. So I appreciate that effort, and I hope that you continue. Again, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Chad Birkin.
Okay.
You don't want to speak? Okay. Michael West.
I'll pass. I just want to express my appreciation for what the task force is doing. It's very encouraging and very happy to see.
Thank you. Laura Knapp.
Hi there, Laura Knapp, 700 College Place. Yes, and I agree that we're making good progress, and we're appreciative of the efforts that the Park Board has made to put together the working group. But I'd still like to see the budget, the capital plan to have money in it for Park Avenue Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. Ronald Jorgen.
Same comments as the others.
Annette Johnston.
Annette Johnston, 836 Burton Avenue. I am happy to see that we're discussing the capital program, but I also see damage after the last storm already at the Park Avenue Beach, and it is my concern that if we don't have money now to fix what is happening now, that by the time the good work that is happening goes by, the problem will be even worse. So I also would like to see money this year to repair or maintain Park Avenue to the point it is now before further erosion occurs.
Thank you. Francis Jane Pizak.
Francis Jane Peshek, 146 Towers Keep, Highland Park. I just wanted to share some information I found out at the boat show this past weekend. Dr. Wallace Nicholas, author of Blue Mind, finds that being on or in or near the water brings vast cognitive, psychological, and social health benefits. One of the best way to achieve this blue mind is on a boat. The blue mind is calm, peacefulness, unity, and happiness associated with water. And so why are we drawn to the water? Well, the brain is drawn to blue above all colors. 75% of our brain is water, and 60% of our body is water. Also, facts, there's 72% of Americans feel healthier after spending time on the water. 84% of parents think their kids would be more likely to unplug on a boat trip versus a road trip. And boating is more accessible than you think. 142 million Americans go boating every year. So boating resets our brains, water relaxes, restores, and helps us reconnect. Boating is awe-inspiring. Awe and wonder change our bodies and mind for the better. Boating induces creativity. Feel-good hormones reduce stress, and water-related play sparks creativity. And boating appeals to our senses. Sight and sound of water increases brain and blood flow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew blue's my favorite color.
Fritz Liquors. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Fritz Litchens, 45 Borders, Highland, and I'd like to take a moment and tell you what Park Avenue Beach and boat launch means to me. This past summer was my first summer of boating, and I have to say it was one of the best summers of my life. I got to watch fireworks down at the Baha'i Temple. Venetian night was awesome. When my friends came on the boat, we would always have a blast. I have countless memories out on that lake that will stick with me for life. And I just want to have more summers like that for as long as I can. And I would just like to thank everybody in the boating community and Yacht Club for keeping the boating spirit alive, and hope everybody had as much fun as I did this past summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ben Johnston?
Oh, I thought it was going to be on the other list. Are there two lists?
The naughty and nice list?
I don't know which one I would be on there, but,
What does he want to speak on?
If you want to speak on Rose, you're welcome to.
no, is that going to be addressed later, though?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious
Yeah.
what,
Yeah, we can-
what.
Yes.
the plan, 'cause I don't know what the
He
plan
can speak
is.
at the end, public comment.
All right, okay. Lynn Weiss? West?
Hello, I'm Lynn West, and I'm at 1900 Green Bay Road in Highland Park. And I would like to see, I'm a member of the Yacht Club, this is my first year, and I would like to see the Yacht Club be involved more with the Park District. I called the Park District today, and there are no programs about lake safety that are now being implemented. And I was so impressed at the thorough, knowledgeable job that they did before they let me get into that boat. So I think, being that we are in a boating community, I think that it should be really a top priority to have a safe place to launch and to reach out more to educate our youth and give them the opportunities to enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you. Peter Mordini?
Peter Mordini at 1853 Sheen Court, Highland Park. I just wanted to take a second and thank the Park District for the big major cleanup, and the city as well, because I think they both had a lot to do down there with all the debris and what have you. So just want to thank you for all that. And I've also been talking and working with the with Buzz from Trap Bags president, and they had some major success in Michigan, and I just look forward to seeing all the pictures coming in to me, and when I get them, I forward them to your staff. So I enjoy doing that, and that's a hopeful way of fixing something here. That's about all I have. Just a few things from the public they couldn't make it here, so they just wanted me to relay it. Some people are wondering, could this be an insurance thing, like to fix the parking lot down there that got all washed away? And because they did some phone calls in some of the districts area, and they said all the paths and all that stuff that would be covered under insurance. So just like just a big national disaster here on this side of the lake. So some of these entities are looking into that to help out. That's what we have it for, insurance. Another thing was Daniel Hirsch couldn't make it today, but I guess I can pedal back. Did you guys say that boating next year will continue regardless if the lake levels are high?
It's going to be dependent upon the safety of the site and,
Right.
yeah, because of the lake levels. That would
Well,
be-
because we did some research, and every other marina and boat launch area still is open regardless. That's not hampering them in any way. Just because of a floating dock is a little higher, is not going to stop anyone. So he would like to see that last sheet piling there on closest to the beach. If we can just, if the short floating dock does not work, maybe build a deck or a platform on that sheet pile there, or something. Let's allocate some money to just keep boating going for next summer, because why not? You might even skip out on dredging because the lake is so high. You might save a lot of money there. But we really don't think it should be even a cause or a worry to stop boating next year, because there's just so much we'll miss, and just for a couple of inches, it just doesn't really ring a bell with everyone. We put a man on the moon, we can build something that we can get somebody in a boat. So that's Daniel Hirsch's thought, and he wasn't here to say that, but I want to relay that let's just think positive all the way and hopefully get that done. And that's about it. Lastly, I think, as we could see, if we did have a better break wall there, it would have saved the parking lot. It would have saved the hut and all the decking that it sits on. It would have saved all of it probably if we had a regular break wall there. And that just goes to show how important that facility there is to save everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Joe Harrison?
Good evening. My name is Joe Harrison. I've been in Highland Park for 60 years. Was a member of the Yacht Club for 30, past Commodore like Barney. And I just want to remind the board that Highland Park is one of the few Illinois cities that has lakefront access, and to use this the best that we can. And I appreciate the effort that you're looking for a solution and working on it. My family has enjoyed it. My kids did. My grandchildren are doing it now. And it's a great resource, but it needs to be developed. And of course, at the time, the usage is down because the lake is up, and also the park district has changed some of the access in terms of daily fees and jet skis and things that were used down there that bring people there. So you really can't compare the numbers as much as you could because of these changes. Anyhow, I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, David Mecklenburg.
Hi, David Mecklenburger, 1180 Hillary Lane, lifelong Highland Park resident, 50-year Park Avenue boat user. I was a couple of weeks ago made a walk from Park Avenue Beach, it's well before the storm, down to Ravine Drive Beach, and just wanted to put out, trying to think outside the box. I noticed that Ravine Drive, the structure had been removed. I wasn't aware of that, but that there's still the foundation there. I don't know if there'd been any conversation or thought about the potential for putting a boat launch in there, if that would financially be more advantageous than what's...
I'm sorry, where are you talking about?
Ravine Drive Beach.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. There's some kind of concrete foundation left from the structure that was there, and that doesn't seem to get hit as hard by the lake. It just occurred to me, as far as might be worth a thought or somebody looking at that, would it be possible to put a ramp there to launch boats? So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
That ends the signed-up speakers. Is there anyone else here who has not signed up who wishes to speak on Park Avenue? Come on down.
Thank you. I got here late, so I apologize. My name is Peter Sherman, 1409 Ridge Road, second generation in Highland Park. I've used the launch ramp since I was probably 14 years old. Smelt fishing was really in season, and we would go down there and enjoy it. Made incredible friends, had amazing experiences. And again, I'm glad that the board is considering this because we have this wonderful natural resource that a lot of cities don't have and don't have this opportunity. And it would just be an extreme shame to see anything negative happen to that. We're boaters, yacht club, the city could go down, utilize this facility. Just thank you, and please try to make this work.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Anybody else? Let's go with our next presentation, a Rosewood Beach update, Jeff Smith and Margaret Boschek.
So this past fall, when Smith Group was here presenting on the challenges at Rosewood Beach and discussing the options for the sand placement project, they also shared with us some options for longer-term fixes, more structural fixes out in the lake. And we moved forward with the sand replacement project and said that we would come back to those larger fixes once that was done. Now that we've completed that portion of the project, Margaret Boschek from Smith Group has returned tonight to talk more about these longer-term fixes. So she has a presentation tonight that we're going to go through, and then that we touch on some of those options a little more hashed out with a little more ideas of what that might look like and talk about when we might need to do these.
There's a lot of chairs over here.
Somebody want Gary Greenberg to be in the meeting.
Hello, I'm Margaret. Hello, everyone. This is the front of me. Now you get to see the back of me. So I apologize. So we're here to talk about Rosewood Beach, and we're going to start off by talking about the storm and the water levels. I know we just talked about that in the Park Avenue beach, but it's important for everyone to hear what we're up against and what's coming down the pipeline. So how do I get this to go forward? Okay, there we go. So NOAA and the Army Corps of Engineers does modeling analyses to do forecasts. That is what you see over here. And they do that based on an understanding of what affects water levels within our Great Lakes systems, which are primarily precipitation and evaporation. Now, back in November, I gave a presentation showing these predicted forecasts for the water levels coming up. Now, in this graphic, you can see our historic low, which happened in 2013, which was at 576. And our historic high happened back in 1986 and was here at 582.35. This past year, we almost hit that with a high of 581.92. So we are only 0.4, a little under half a foot from that historic high. And the forecast at that time for January, which we are now in, was to be 10.3 inches higher than 2019. Now, I don't want to scare you because 2019 was on record the highest precipitation year ever, out of the 125 years of recording, I should say. Do we expect that to happen again? No, but it did force our water levels much higher than what was predicted last year around this time. Now, here we are in January, and the predictions are a little bit different. If we look at where we actually are for the average of this month, it's at 581.51, which is 17 inches higher than last year. Now, that's a shift of 7 inches versus the predictions just from 2 months ago. And now the reasoning behind that is because we're a lot warmer than we were originally anticipated to be. The National Weather Service, which works with the Army Corps of Engineers and NOAA, at the time in November said we were going to have an average winter. Well, it turns out we're a little warmer than we thought. So what that means is that our precipitation comes down in rain and immediately enters our watersheds and goes into our lakes, versus coming down in snow and sitting up on the shoreline for an extended period of time. So we're remaining at high water levels. And this has played with the models forecasting forward what we're looking at for our summer. And if I overlay these two predictions, you can see one showed us going down, and now the new one shows us going up. So what does this mean for our summer? This is the forecast or the bulletin put out by Army Corps of Engineers every couple of weeks, actually. And it shows These little lines, which are 1986, those are our record high water levels for each month. And if you can see this nice green dash line, that is the average of the projected height ranges. And you can see it's above every single month up until June. So if we follow this, we're going to be in a record-setting year. Just let everyone know what we're up against. Will they remain high forever? No. If I was to be a betting person, I would say no, which I'll get into with this winter storm. So just a few days ago, we had, as you know, a very big storm. Hopefully some of you got out to the shoreline to see it. It's quite impressive. I was unable to pull actual wave information from the lake only because the buoys have already been removed for the year. Normally, the buoys are taken out in the fall so that they don't get iced in and damaged. So I don't have the real data. I only have these graphics that come out from NOAA as forecasts and nowcasts, and they go out for about 75 or 72 hours. So this was the peak of the storm on Saturday from their predictions and their nowcasts, which shows about 12-foot waves offshore. Now, if we look at a 12-foot wave on this, this is a distribution analysis. I won't get into it. It's a statistical probability. This says that this winter storm was a 2-year event, which doesn't sound very big. 2-year events have about a 10% chance of happening on any given year, and we just happen to be hit by one. The trouble is, because we anticipate being covered in ice in January, a lot of these waves don't actually hit our shoreline. The ice acts to protect our shoreline and keep sands from moving, keep our bluffs safe, and everything else. Unfortunately, we don't have any ice. So without that protective shield, a 2-year event at high water levels is very damaging. Now, this is the other reason Saturday's storm was damaging. We see the average water level for January is at this 581.5, but that's just an average. Because winds were out of the north, it pushed water down into the Chicago area and us. And what that means is that there's a surge. It's a temporary elevation change of water as it comes into our area. Now, this surge pushed us up to about 583, which is a very high water level, and much higher than historically what we see as an average water level. So that allows waves to get closer and closer to shore with more energy and more intensity. So this is a typical cross-section of the breakwaters at Rosewood Beach. This is from the construction drawings. And now what I want you to notice is the crest elevation up here is at 587. And chart datum, which is a lower water level, is here at 577.5. Now this is that same cross-section. I just removed all the gobbledygook so we could look at it a little more clearly. Lake bed is about at 574. And a rule of thumb is that waves crash or they break when they are 78% of the water depth. Now, an average water level for Lake Michigan is 578.84. This translates into a maximum wave of about 4 feet. And 4 feet on this breakwater is not going to run over the top of it. It's going to break on the front slope and dissipate and head back down. This Saturday, we had water levels at 583. This translates to a maximum wave of 7 feet. Now, this graphic, although pretty, is actually scaled to be 7 feet. So you can see that waves crashing along this are going to go right over the top of it, which is precisely what happened. Oh, upside down again. So that's your breakwater out there. If you flip yourself upside down, if anyone wants to do a headstand, and you can see those waves crashing right over the top. Happens with your videos all the time. I don't know. And you can see that the water is running up pretty far. Here's the debris field up at the top near the interpretive center. But the big takeaway from that is that waves actually went over those breakwaters and continued rushing up onto our beaches and along the shoreline. So they dissipated wave energy, but that's a lot more energy than anticipated inside the cove. guess it's going to do it again. How do I move forward? There we go. So here's a picture taken during the storm down in the, do we call it the volleyball cove? Okay, the southern cove, the last cove. And this cove was not nourished in the past few months. And as a result, waves are actually crashing up the shoreline and hitting the boardwalk. Fortunately, it's just a boardwalk, and I don't believe that any of the boards actually popped off, right? Okay, so that's good. This is a picture taken the day after in the interpretive cove. Now you can see that it has pulled out some sand, and now the boardwalk, the bottom of the boardwalk is exposed again, but you can also see the size of this tree. Which was likely not already floating around in the lake at the beginning of the storm, so someone lost a tree. This is a picture before nourishment from last year in October, and then we nourished with new sands, and this is a picture during the storm, and you can see how flat it is, but we've protected the shoreline. We've protected the breakwater and even the infrastructure here. So all of this, these waves came in and dissipated along this new, higher, flatter beach because of that nourishment. Without that nourishment, these waves would have come in and continued to erode back this shoreline. This is sheep pile. It would have hit the sheep pile and continued on and hit the building. So that did not happen, which in my mind, I call it a win. So talking about whether this is cyclical or the new norm, we don't have a lot of data on the Great Lakes. We only have data that runs back for monthly average water levels to about 1918. So we're looking at about 100 years of data. But if we look at that, we do see the peaks and the valleys of water levels. Each of these dots represents an average water level for a month. And if you start stringing this out, you start to see a little bit of a cadence around 22 to 23 years. Now, this is an image that I stole from the Army Corps of Engineers, and they didn't quite have 2019 in here, but they were predicting another high water scenario about 20 years, and they were only off by 2, since we had a nice peak last year, and that would be 22 years after July. So is this, because it falls in this statistic, I'd like to say it was forecasted, but what this also suggests is that high water levels are cyclic, and this will go back down. We just have to get through this uncomfortable, difficult part that we're at right now. I can't say it's not the new norm. I do not believe it to be the new norm based on historical evidence. We also wanted to look at whether storm events were intensifying. So what this is showing here is offshore waves, and I'm sorry I keep moving around the mouse, but what this shows is hourly offshore waves, which is why there's a whole lot of data there since 1979. And you can see all those little peaks. And the idea is whether it's becoming a bit more concentrated over here. And I can argue it either way. This is actually 2 data sets been spliced together around 1914, because that's just when one service took over from another one. And so I can't say that the appearance of a little bit more dense at the end isn't just a shadow of that splicing. But I don't believe that the storms are getting worse. I think the intensity seems worse along our shorelines because of the water levels. So this isn't a change in our storm systems. It's the effect on us because of the high water levels. All right, so let's talk about Rosewood Beach and the concepts that we came up with. Now, previously when I was here, I presented 4 concepts. Now, 2 of those we threw away, and I was asked to look at one additional concept. And so I'm going to present on just 3 at this meeting. The first one being an underwater weir. Now, this is a cross-section of what that would look like. What's in the background is your existing breakwater, and that is as it was drawn in the previous picture that I showed you. Now, the underwater weir, positioning the height of this, I chose an average water level, which is at 578.8. This means that back in 2013, this weir would be visible. You would see the top of it, and where it's positioned is in between our breakwaters. So this is a rendering of what that would kind of look like when it's underwater. It would be placed across this entrance. And now because it's low, during high water, such as now, you're not going to see it at all. And what it has the added benefit that sand cannot easily migrate out of our cove. So sand that's inside our cove that starts to flatten will just build up on the outside of that weir. But what this means for you as a recreational user is that you're walking out, you get to the edge of those breakwaters, you walk across stones, and you drop into water. So there is a difference of feel there. I'm only showing the interpretive cove, but this can be applied to any location, which is why the estimate is per linear foot. So, and that is for the full width of the breakwater at that average water elevation. Because once it's submerged, larger waves need a longer beam width or a width to feel that rock underwater and actually fall over it. I'm sorry, I should be facing this way, shouldn't I? Sorry.
You're fine.
Great. So that is the underwater weir. The other alternative is a reduced gap width. This is an extension of the existing breakwaters that we have. So this is the cross-section of your existing breakwaters, and it requires a lot more rock. And it's up to the height of your existing breakwaters. It's no different. So all it will look like is that we've closed the gap a little bit. This and the underwater weir both have to be constructed from a barge. They cannot be done from land just because they're in deeper water. And it requires larger riprap, which at the moment is a little scarce. Everyone is having the same difficulties, so finding large riprap is a bit more expensive at the moment. But if we find it and we build this, the reduced gap will lessen the wave energy coming in. It'll dissipate more quickly through that reduced gap, which means that in low water, our sand will start to build up and it'll start to push toward that entrance. But it is more effective in breaking wave energy and holding our sand than the submerged option. This has a higher price tag only because it's a lot more rock. And again, it's that larger rock that's a bit more expensive. The last option we looked at is a back of beach revetment. Now, this is a cross-section from some structural analysis of the interpretive center. So this interpretive center has sheet pile in front of it as a protective barrier, but it is the only location in front of a building that has some type of protective barrier. All the rest are on piles and single source items. It's my understanding the parking lot doesn't have any barrier at all. It's just the sand. So what we would look to do is put a revetment in front, and the revetment gets buried in sand. So this blue line up here is this is the interpretive center, and this blue line is the top of sand coming down. So you won't even see it. It'll be underground. But this is generally the cross-section that we would want it to be. Now, what happens when the sand starts to disappear, as it did last year, is that it becomes visible. It's self-deployed. It's just there as a barrier. And what it does also mean is that the sand, once this becomes exposed, it'll start to disappear a little more quickly than it would if it was all just sand. And the reason for that is that when waves hit it, they reflect. And they reflect back, carrying sand with it. But it is a final defense, and it holds the system in place. And that is really what the purpose of this is. I see that line is still there. So you wouldn't see it. It would just look like the system that you have now. And where we've proposed to do this, at least in the interpretive cove, is at this location, in front of the building and also in front of the parking lot, and tied into the existing revetment on this side, or groin rock structure. It can be constructed from landside equipment. It only requires some excavation. It does include the mid-size and large riprap, but the cost is less because there's a lot less rock going in. And also the landside equipment is a huge reduction in cost as well. But it does not help maintain the beach. It is a final defense for the back of beach. So it's the defense versus the offense of the two other options that were presented. So now when we look at because I know you like numbers, when we look at all three of the coves, if we apply that cost per linear foot, these are the lengths each would require, and it goes across for the underwater rear, reduced gap, and the back of revetment. Now, I put a little star by this guy because there's not really infrastructure here that, if damaged, couldn't cheaply be repaired. And therefore, putting in any kind of back of beach revetment any back of beach revetment wasn't really a great use of your dollars. So that's why that one is starred. Now, I'm not saying every cove needs the same alternative. We can do an underwater weir in the, say, interpretive cove, and we can reduce the gap in the swimming cove. There's no reason why we couldn't do that. But these are generally the costs that you would see associated with that construction. And now these costs do include engineering, permits, mobilization, and all that fun stuff. So it's an overall cost which I wanted to prepare you for. Oh, and this is my final slide. This is talking about the timeline of moving forward on any of these options. Once we receive an authorization to proceed, engineering and permits will take about 2 to 3 weeks. They're all very straightforward options, so this doesn't require a lot of intensive time on my end, fortunately. 95% drawings would only be a week later, and then we'd get comment from you, and we'd go out to bid. Now, bidding, the turnaround on that is about 1 month to give contractors time to reply, and then we would have to decide which one we wanted to go for. And the construction is estimated to take about 6 to 8 weeks with weather delays. In other states, there are fishery windows. I haven't found out what they are down here yet, but we would need to avoid them. They're usually in early spring, so they might coincide where if we were to start right now. So we'd have to look at that. But the total timeline is then therefore about 4 to 6 months. And that does not include any kind of delays for meetings, turnarounds, delay of the contractor and such. And that's my presentation on Rosewood.
If we do number 3,
Yes.
revetment, that protects the building and structures, but that does not protect the sandy beach, is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. The sand, if it wants to go, it's going to go.
And if we did 1 or 2, we would protect the beaches, would it also protect the buildings because the waves aren't coming up as far?
Correct, yes. So your defense right now for your buildings is your sand. So by changing the breakwaters on the outside, we're protecting the sand. By only installing the revetment on the backside, we're allowing that sand to naturally erode if it wants to erode. Now, it's eroding at a very high rate right now because of high water levels. When water levels go back down, it's going to replenish and start to build back out again. That's just the natural dynamics of the beach. But for the moment, this is where we are, which is a high erosive environment, and we're projected to be this way for another year.
Okay. Good.
If we were to do either of the first 2 plans, but let's say we did not do something on the southernmost, does just the fact that we are protecting those increase damage to an unprotected cove? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying. No. I believe that each cell is acting independently. The only benefit the southern cell is getting from the northern 2 cells is that when they lose sand, which you can even see in this picture, sand being pulled out and running along here, it tends to go into the next one. It hopscotches. So then once that sand gets pulled out, it will end up in that southern recreational volleyball cove before it gets pulled back out.
So it may be possible to do either the weir or, I forgot what you called the second one?
Reduce gap.
Reduce gap, and it not having a negative effect on the third cove because we've done that.
Correct. Yep. I don't see a direct exacerbation of the situation that you're in due to changes to the northern 2 coves.
regard to the first two options, the third option, obviously, we're turning the focus away from the sand and letting Mother Nature do what they do. But the first two options, do you foresee any sand replenishment in the future if we do those options?
I have not included it in the cost estimate at this time. Sand grooming and replenishment is natural when it comes to a beach. When we get high water levels, it's a dynamic substrate, and it's going to move around with storms. So I'm not going to say you're never going to need replenishment of some sands, but you will not receive the loss and erosion that you have in the past year.
So with the first two options, there's existing sand.
Yes.
Does it make it less likelihood that we're capturing additional sand because now we have more offshore lakefront protection structures?
You will capture more sand.
More sand?
Yes.
And how, explain that, how that works.
Yes. So right now, there is a static position that the beach wants to be in based on this gap width, right?
Okay.
And the lake levels and the storms. And those things combined, there is this magical position where that's where it wants to be. And it's always moving back and forth where it wants to be. Now, if you close this gap and did not provide additional sands, it's not full, and therefore it's starving. So any additional sands that come in, say from the north, it's going to say, I want to keep this because I need this to feel static. I know I just gave
I
feelings.
understand it, because we talked about that when we first did the original plan with the Army Corps, and there was a lot of discussion at that time, and if I butcher the word, I'm sorry, I'm butchering words all over the place today, but littoral drift, or was that what it is?
Yes, littoral drift.
All right.
Very good.
So the littoral drift. So how would either of these two options, one or two, influence that? Because obviously that'd be concern for the people downstream further south.
That is true. So until a beach feels full or static, it's going to want to absorb any sands that are coming from the north, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, correct. And in which case, if we were to, say, narrow the gap width at this point, depending on the water level and depending on the size of that gap, that tells us where that shoreline wants to be. We would want to add sands to that point, or more than likely, with the work that we've already done, we're already there. We're in a full situation, which is why you see flattening, because it's wanting to be a little bit further back. But when we close that up, it will be more static.
And is that the equilibrium we were talking about last time?
Equilibrium, mhm.
That's what we're talking, okay. So with regard to option number 3, which is the revetment, we talked about the fact that we're basically throwing the white flag up and not trying to fight losing sand, that we're actually focusing on preserving our improvements, our investment down there.
Right.
If we did the revetments, let's just use, for example, the swimming cove, do you foresee, even with these high lake levels, that we would have basically have no sand for people to sit and bathe, even under intense storms or high lake levels? Would it wash off all the sand, or would we just be protecting the buildings, or how would that, what do you foresee there?
Well, we can get to the point, now the sand that you put down is more stable in the swimming cove, which is good. If we were to use, say, the volleyball court cove as an example, where the sand is more fine
Yes.
for recreation, and we're seeing from pictures, it wants to continue to erode all the way back. If you were to put a revetment in, it would expose that revetment. You'd have residual sands on the side behind directly the breakwaters, but it would remain open until water levels started to go back down and sand started to come back in. But until that time, your recreational spaces are going to be small.
So it's be small, but they would still exist.
They would still exist.
So with regard to the exposing of the revetment, you're saying that's with the high lake levels, correct?
Yes.
And then when the lake levels go down, assuming they will go down,
Yes.
How does the sand then get replenished and then therefore cover the revetment if the lake levels are going down?
Great. So when beaches start to flatten due to these high water levels, this sand gets pulled offshore and creates a more shallow situation. It doesn't seem shallow because our water levels have gone up, but it is. It's shallow and it's flatter. Now, as our water levels start to go back down, it's too flat. And so when waves start crashing over it, it starts building it up and pushing it into a berm. And as that berm gets pushed up, it gets pushed in. So it starts showing up on our shorelines again. And that's the natural dynamics of dunes and beaches, is that when that water level goes back down, it gets pushed back up.
And do we need to do any man-made assistance, like with bulldozers or anything, moving around, or just happens naturally?
You would want to rake it, and to get it to the height that you're looking at, if it's not getting there naturally, then you would want to supplement.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can ask a follow-up question that if we install this, we have to cover it with sand,
Yes.
which, does that imply bringing in more sand to cover it, or are you just moving the sand that's there?
I'm just moving the sand that's there. At least for the swimming cove and the interpretive cove, there's no reason why you couldn't just move the sand that you have there, cover it back over, and then you're going to have a surplus of sand. So then you can grade that to the sides. For the recreational cove to the south, if the sand doesn't already exist, then we would look to bring in more sand to cap it so that there was a nice cover that you can walk across to get down to the beach.
On this option, the permitting should be easier, shouldn't it? The one that's on the screen.
It is all outside of the ordinary high water mark today. Because permitting regulatory looks at where the ordinary high water mark shifts day to day. It is not a set vertical location. It shifts horizontally as beaches shift. So right now we are outside of the ordinary high water mark, so permitting is much more streamlined. For the swimming cove, I think we are. I'm sorry, not the swimming cove, the recreational cove to the south. I believe we are, because still water level is still pretty far down, and we should have enough sand that ordinary high water mark is still down toward the water surface. It is a more streamlined process, yes.
So when we say more streamlined, and I know you had some time frames on the permitting.
Yes.
But if we're offshore, then we're talking about months of permitting, but for emergency
Right,
applications?
right. So right now, because we are at high water levels, and Illinois hasn't responded to my emails as readily as Michigan and Wisconsin, but they are expediting permits. The turnaround for one of my projects in Michigan was a week, which was really impressive. Now, that was a shoreline revetment, and that's exactly what you're looking to do here. Right now, Wisconsin has self-reporting. You push some stone in and you let them know what you did afterward, because people need to protect their properties. Illinois still hasn't put that out officially, but they are saying, what are you doing? Okay, that doesn't sound so bad. Go ahead and do it. Submit the paperwork later.
Brian, I have a couple more questions. Brian?
Yes.
We're working under the assumption that the lake is cyclical and then it's going to go down. Let's just say this is the new norm, and lake levels are going to be at this level or higher. We kind of talked about, right now there's topping over the existing breakwaters.
Yeah.
And if lake waters, if this is the new norm, I assume when we have storms like we had last weekend, we will still have that topping, even under scenario 1 and scenario number 2.
That is correct. Yes, you would.
And without protecting the we could still have exposure if we remain at this level or even go higher to our improvements. So the only way to 100% to protect the boardwalk and the buildings down there is to put the revetment in. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the rest of them, we're still at the mercy of option number 1 and option number 2. We're still at the mercy of lake levels.
Yes.
And if we go back to equilibrium.
Yes.
Have we, I know that we talked about that a lot when we were doing the project, the emergency sand replenishment. How long will it take for us to reach that equilibrium point so we know where that slope is and how that's going to be, a normal conditions, when that slope will be maintained.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if we're already there. I mean, we're getting hit by big storms, big winter storms, where otherwise we would have been land fast if we had the ice that we should have this time of year, because we're not that cold. But this slope that you have survived that storm very well, and in which case I'm going to say you're close to equilibrium for that slope now.
And so what does that mean? Can you explain that, what being at equilibrium?
It has flattened to the point where it's now stable and breaking those waves, but the grains are not being lifted into the water every time there's the downrush of a wave. Because if the grains are very fine and you have a wave passing, when it's getting pulled back out, it lifts those grains and takes them with it. And that's essentially what erosion is.
Okay, so I hate throwing things back at you that you said a couple months ago.
Sure.
But you said that you were 85% sure that the sand replenishment was going to work and it was going to protect the investment that we've made down there.
Yeah.
And do you still stand by that?
I still say it's protecting your investment.
Thank you. Okay.
I have a question about the storm size versus intensity.
Yes.
That you mentioned. So I guess the question I have, and it covers both Rosewood and Park Avenue, is that in your professional opinion, it sounds like to you that you think that this is a part of a cyclical cycle.
Yes.
Okay. And every logical sort of thing leads me down that path too, except it doesn't seem like we're dealing with logic lately. Is there a scientific consensus that some sort of global climate event is happening that is changing the size of the storms, thus creating higher water levels, thus creating more damage? Or does the science think that this too shall pass?
Depends which scientist you talk to, but I can only deal in factual truths of historical evidence. And in which case, if you look at ice cover, it's going down. You look at temperature, it's going up. And so that tells me we're heading into, we are warming. And that means more precipitation for our area. And because we do not have that balance of precipitation evaporation, we're getting more precipitation, we're getting higher lake levels. So if you look at the long-term forecast, we are wetter, we are warmer, and that translates into higher water levels.
Yeah, and the way it was explained to us at your very first presentation was that Lake Michigan is basically a bathtub.
It is.
And there is no release valve for this water, and it stays there for, was it 90 years? Or some crazy thing, like the moment it drips in there, it takes all that time to get back out again.
It does. It takes a very long time.
And there's no man-made, there's no, canal or anything like that that can be built to release the pressure on a Great Lake?
No, well, I'll answer that by saying there is for Lake Superior.
That's Lake Michigan, isn't it?
Sorry?
Is it Lake Michigan they release
They
that?
release it into Lake Michigan.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, they do. So
It's like a local golf course.
Hey, we're not saying that on the record. Okay?
the Sault Ste. Marie Dam holds the water level, and that is regulated by the Army Corps of Engineers. They, at their discretion, can release water out of Lake Superior into Michigan and Huron. Due to the size difference, 4 inches out of Lake Superior is 2 inches in Michigan, Huron. But we therefore have a natural flow from then all the way to the St. Louis Seaway because we go over Niagara Falls. And it can only translate as much as water as it possibly can. It just runs down into Lake Erie and continues down to the falls and then drops into Lake Ontario, and then out the St. Lawrence Seaway. So there's no other way to speed that process up. There are a few diversions, but they're just not great enough to make a big impact.
Yeah.
Chicago being a diversion.
No, I meant to ask this question, and I'm getting, I saw this in 60 Minutes last week about Venice.
Uh-oh.
And Venice flooding. Did you notice in the newspaper today that said that now there's no water there? It was completely flooded 2 months ago, 60 Minutes to 20 Minutes on it, and now there's no water there. I mean, is there something going on that we don't know about? It's the North American,
In Venice?
yeah.
In Italy?
Yeah. The North Atlantic current?
They had a really enormous tide outflow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that caused the canals to drain.
It's incredible what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen that the canal's drained. That's fascinating. I would love to see that and all the
There was an
relics
interesting
that are
article in the Tribune
exposed.
last week about Lake Huron,
Lake
because
Huron
obviously
write it?
it's the same, what? No,
Huron write
no, this is the Lake Huron, it's about Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
There was an interesting article in the Tribune about Lake Huron, because it's the same, it shares the same watershed as Lake Michigan. It's one big lake, basically.
It is.
And what they were saying, and I'm stepping on Karen, I'm paraphrasing, but basically due to the warmer weather, the atmosphere can hold more water, which creates more rain. So as a result of global warming, we may have, just piggyback what they said, we may be having more of these rain events. I think Tom Skilling said 4 out of the 6 most wettest years have happened in the last 12 years.
They have, yes. That's another presentation I give, actually.
Wow. Yeah.
But
Yes.
staying with this presentation.
Yes, staying with this one.
Yeah.
If we were to select this option,
Yes.
or any of the options, when would we have to make, I thought there might have been a timeline, when would we have to make a decision, and could the work be done to allow us to have swimming starting Labor Day?
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day, I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say Labor
I went
Day.
backwards for a minute.
Nobody wants to swim.
Yeah. Memorial Day is at the end of May, correct?
Yeah.
Every year.
Thank you. Yeah. Due to the timeline and being 4 to 6 months, it would be right in that window. And I also want to point out that Memorial Day is smack in the middle of Wisconsin fishery window, and I can imagine that the fishery window is almost the same here, which is generally April through June. Brian's going, maybe not. Okay. So in which case, we would want to keep then construction in water outside of that time. That doesn't mean we can't do alternative 5, which is the revetment on the back of the beach.
And what is the timeline is for the revetments from start to finish?
For the revetments, I'd still put it in the 4 to 6, because then we just don't have the stopgap of those fishery windows. We still would need to submit the permit drawings and get all of our documents together, another week to get drawings. So we could have construction drawings in 3 to 4 weeks and then go out for bid. But we still need that turnaround, unless you have a sole source that you want to go out to. But I imagine you would have to bid for something this large. So we would need a month for that. And then it's them gearing up and getting ready and starting.
Have you been hired by any other communities, lakefront communities in this area?
In this year?
Yeah, this area, like.
We are working with Wilmette, and we're working with Chicago District.
And are they doing anything different than we're doing, or they have every situation's unique?
No, a lot of them are much further behind than you are.
What does that mean?
They haven't even started thinking about it.
Okay.
They're still identifying the places that are most at risk.
Got it.
Well, anyhow, I think this could be done in phases so that we could still have swimming at Rosewood. If we defer the swimming cove to be the last one, could work around it.
Yes, you could. Access to the recreation cove would be difficult because it would go through that area for the access, because I'm assuming it's coming down to the parking lot. So that's something to consider. And remobilization of your contractor is added cost.
It's obviously one of the balancing factors.
Yeah.
Anybody else? We gotta let us finish first. Mr. Harrison.
I got one simple question about the swimming in the cove with options 1 and 2. What happens to the water depth in the area of swimming in the cove 2?
Well, with
It's
option,
going to fill with sand based on your...
yeah, option 1, the underwater weir, it holds sand in there. So if it comes down off the shore, off of the slope, it builds up.
So it will reduce the swimming.
Yes, it
A
will.
lot.
It will reduce the depth of the swimming. Yes.
Yeah, but that's what the cove was built for.
Right. So that might not be the best option for that cove, right? The reduced gap, we would have to look at the dynamics because we don't want to actually exacerbate the problem by pushing water into the cove, having that water build up, and then when it comes out, just the sheer velocity takes sand with it as well. So we would have to size it properly for that. Dredged? Inside the cove? It would require a permit to dredge it, and unfortunately, sands around here are considered contaminated, and if you dredge it, it's going to be hard to be putting it back onto the shoreline. I just say that from experience. Yeah.
Are there any implications for like algae in really warm summer months?
Yep.
Will some of these options create more stagnant water in those pools that could potentially become stones?
Not enough. Not enough. We're open lake environment, so you would get that in like perched water in pockets or in wetlands, but you have enough dynamics within these coves not to create stagnant water that would result in lessening water quality.
All right, Margaret, thank you. Mr. Johnson, you want to address the board now that the Rosewood Beach?
Yeah, no,
Would you step forward to the microphone?
Yeah, if you're going to address the board.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I'll address the board, but I do have a question. As far as the reduced gap, going back to the original plan, do you feel that, I live a block away from Rosewood, and I see it almost every day, so it doesn't seem like only the high water has affected the sands. They've been reducing for a long time, because you have these wave events, you have storm events that take the sand, and it hasn't been replenished. And then, this last year has been devastating to the sand.
Yes.
And, threatening structure as well. It feels like the original design didn't consider what would happen as far as if you modeled it and you understood over time how, even without high water, it would take the sand away. And it feels like, and I've been down there plenty of times, the break wall, it does a nice job when it blocks the waves, but the waves coming through the center are the problem, obviously. So, do you feel that? Do you feel that reduced gap should have been done originally? Do you feel that it's it should have been doing its job?
So gap diffraction and the amount of energy that leaks through is directly related to a wave environment, but that wave environment is intensified as our water levels went up. So we are at the edges of what you would design for normally, because normally you're going to design for 90% of the time. Water levels are within this range, wave heights are within this range. Occasionally you're going to get above or below. Otherwise, you're over-designing. It's just part of the value engineering design process, per se. So we are in those extremely high water levels. And Rosewood was constructed in 14, directly after 13, which was historic lows, and then just shot up ever since and changed 2 feet in 1 year. So we would imagine right after something is constructed, it goes through a settling period. We call it shakedown because it's finding its happy place, and that includes the breakwaters as well. Stones will shift, sand will shift, it'll move back and forth. The sand is definitely more dynamic than the rest of the site, which is made to be static. But the sand shifts and finds its happy place. And because the water level has continually increased, it's always trying to find that happy place, and more energy is now leaking through that gap due to the higher water levels, and those waves getting bigger, closer to shore. So I don't see it as a failure in the design. I think the design for average water level is fine. It flattened the beach. The beach had a nice size. And when it was average, what year was that, like 2015? It was only a year after it was designed, but it was nice. It was nice and flat and looking good. It was only when we got to the fringes that these big storms with the very big waves coming through that gap allowed a lot of sediment to disappear.
Were you monitoring the sand?
Actually, I was. So I have been performing a 5-year monitoring study for you over the past 5 years. which just terminated last year. But you can see the flattening of those beaches in response to the higher water levels. But you also see that that sand is being displaced and outside of the breakwaters. And once it gets outside of those breakwaters, it's not coming back in unless the water levels go back down. So once it's outside, that beautiful word littoral drift, which is in a north to south fashion, it captures that sand and pushes it south. So it's lost. And then it just continues on its way.
And which plan do you think would have the most likely to work long term?
Any of these options.
The first two especially.
Yes. So the more effective at breaking down your wave energy right now is the reduced gap. But what that means is that when water levels go back down, more sand is going to come because it's a nice, calm, happy location. So then you have your beach extending toward the breakwaters more than you probably originally wanted or designed for. With an underwater weir, you're kind of just doing that already because you're capturing it up against that weir and not allowing it to escape. Whether it can be rigged back onto the shore at that point, it probably still requires a permit, and we'll see what they would allow you to do. But the more effective at breaking down the wave energy in the current state that we're at, which is high water levels, would be the reduced gap. Any actions we make right now will have lasting long-term effects when water levels go back down. So we should be very mindful about how much we do.
We're going to move on now.
No.
Sorry, yes.
Is there any public comment? Let's see public comment on this?
It's just, I think a lot of this has been covered in other meetings.
What's the next one?
Next, because we're still on Rosewood Beach.
Okay.
Beach Management Plan, grant, Jeff and Margaret to produce again.
Thanks, Margaret.
She's not going anywhere.
She's not going far.
We'll
I'm
thank
going
her
to talk for
each
2
time.
seconds and I'm gone again. All right.
This is her setup.
Thanks. So the Park District's land management plan recommends that we develop a beach management plan. As we've heard here, we have challenges with our lakefront properties. And so in an effort to develop this plan, which would create management strategies for all 4 lakefront properties, the Park District applied for a grant through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Coastal Management Program. And I'm pleased to say that we did receive word that we are being awarded this grant. And in order to move forward with this project, the Park District needs to enter into a grant agreement with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And so on the next regular meeting on the 28th, staff will come and recommend that the board approve that agreement. Now, this plan, like I said, it would develop management and strategies for the 4 different properties. The cost to develop this plan is $35,000, and half of that will be covered from the grant, reimbursed from this grant. Now, as we know, Smith Group is very familiar with the lakefront properties. We've been working with them for several years, including the 5-year monitoring study at Rosewood. And so the Park District plans to work with Smith Group on developing this plan. With that said, I'm going to ask Margaret to come back up one last time and give the board a much better understanding than I've done here on what exactly a beach management plan is.
Right. It's a very short presentation, I promise. I think I can I just click? Yeah, I can. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so the beach management plan is looking at your 4 parks that align the beach, Moraine, Millard, Park Avenue, and Rosewood. So the goal, which I put way too many words on here, and I apologize, is to create the planning document to help you make decisions. Most of the, I should say, what it's going to address is these high-level topics of water quality, habitat retention and growth, public safety, and access. So it's for recommendations for improvements, but it does not provide constructible engineering documents. That's not the purpose of the beach management plan. So it also doesn't go into studies. So like we're talking about littoral drift, It wouldn't go into a littoral drift study, but it might make a recommendation that an area is at risk and therefore should be studied more thoroughly or completely. So the first beach, I just kind of wanted to go over the Moraine, has the dog park, and now access to this park is a problem because of the washout of that walkway. So even though that walkway is not necessarily on the beach, it will be addressed in the beach management plan. In fact, any access points getting down to the beach are addressed in the beach management plan, as well as roof use, pickup, maintenance, so on and so forth. Mostly recommendations. Let's see. Millard, again, passive recreation, the status of the beach, how the sand is faring through these high water levels. If we're seeing any issues to the bluffs or to the back of beach, those will be addressed in that. Park Avenue Beach. Thank you. I don't know who's doing it, but thanks. Yeah.
It's my regular dog.
This is where we're going to talk about the boat launch a little bit. We've already gotten a lot further into the boat launch and the future of the boat launch and concepts. Those would not be addressed, but maintenance of the launch is. As well as on the north side, we have the passive recreation beaches, so we'd be talking about the sand, the maintenance there as well. And then finally, Rosewood Beach, which I think we've talked about extensively, so you kind of have an idea of those four. So this is the preliminary outline of what this report is going to cover. Now, this was generated looking at beach management plans put together by other communities in our area. So I brought three as an example, Waukegan being the closest, that just completed theirs in 2016. The beach management plan of Virginia Beach, and then very specifically New Jersey was looking at threatened and endangered species and how their beach management plan ties into that, which is one of the topics we will cover. So based on our research, we came up with this outline, which is very large and is going to kill a couple trees when we print it, but it's going to give you all the information you need to move forward in a more complete way to understand what implementable strategies you have for these locations. So I will give these to you, just in case you want to peruse them at your leisure. Oh, there was an animation in the, it doesn't matter. So if we go back one, can we go back one? Okay. So high water levels and what we're already addressing at Rosewood Beach. I guess this is an old version, but that's okay. There's a few of them that we've already talked about, such as the coastal dynamics, the sand management. Those are just going to be repeats in the beach management plan. But beyond just the recreation and habitat, which we haven't touched, we're also going to talk about parking, signage, and also programming of these spaces and how it can be programmed in a holistic way to keep those beaches safe and enjoyable for everyone. So I had a little more in the other one, but it's pretty much all I've already said. That's my presentation on that. It's pretty short.
So for example, at Millard/Ravine Drive,
Yes.
this will provide suggestions perhaps of how it can be better used by the community?
Yes, yes. So if there are opportunities for recreational uses that are not being realized, those will come out in the recommendations. Now, some of those you might just throw to the wayside, but some of them might just even get the ball rolling. And we plan on not only having exhaustive conversations with yourselves, but also doing a couple public input information series and even events down at the parks themselves to talk to people. So starting now, we will be creating our base maps of these locations. It's not the best time to visit these locations, but we can start doing our site analyses so that when we come down for the purposes of public outreach and information gathering, we can tie those efforts together to finalize those inventories and opportunities.
Does this take into consideration the park that's adjacent to the beach?
It has to do with our neighbors and understanding who our neighbors are and what impacts the park might have on them. Zoning and property ownership is a piece of the beach management plan, yes.
All right, thank you.
Did you, Margaret, I had something. Did you, you said that this cost about $35,000 and this grant or this award would be for about 17?
The grant is about half.
Okay, so prior to even applying for this, is this something we were going to do anyway?
So the Park District, some years back developed a land management plan, and part of that plan is the recommendation that we develop a management plan. And so we were funding opportunity. So the 50% match is budgeted in this year's budget.
Okay, because this would seem to me as best practices, so I'm glad we found a way to fund it. Partially,
Okay.
Yep, and this is a working draft for the outline to give us some guidance, but I'm sure it'll grow and it's a living document up until the day it's printed. And hopefully thereafter.
Thank you. Community Park Update, Rebecca Grill to present.
Okay, I guess we're turning landward now. I wanted to give you an update on some of the developments, the progress we've been making already on the property, as well as some of the developments with approvals that we're seeking, permitting, and some grant opportunities. That was good. We can leave it on that first slide, Dan, thank you. So this is a picture of Highland Park Woods, which is the easternmost part of the property, and we have been doing a great deal of restoration in that area. That's a 10-acre woodlands that's part of the property. We had the help of contractors, and also our volunteers are out there making that woodlands a healthier place, clearing buckthorn, and eventually I think that we'll see a nice array of spring wildflowers growing in there. We also took advantage of the nice weather to be able to go in and do some repairs on culverts that needed to be replaced. We got permitting done and finished that construction in a very timely manner, thanks to Planning Department and help of Parks. We have also completed and applied for our design for the North Pond shoreline restoration. That, you'll remember, was an IEPA grant that we received through SMC, so that is progressing forward and will be packaged into our overall construction for the project. At the same time, we have been working and are nearly complete on our construction documents. So we have our existing conditions and our features to be built, our pathways are in a document that'll be being prepared now for submittal for SMC permitting this month is our aim. And also going to the city of Highland Park for going through their community development process. So we're getting that finalized as we speak. We did meet in mid-November with the Lake County Forest Preserve District and the city of Highland Park. We are awaiting their revised agreements that we need to move forward with approvals of our final master plan. The latest word that we've received is that we should be getting those documents this week, January 13th, week of January 13th. And their proposal is that we appear at their planning committee meeting February 11th. This would mean, I need to point out, that we would be able to turn those documents around back to them by January 28th. So we do not yet, it's late breaking news, we do not yet have those revised documents in hand. So I'm sure that Brian will be reaching out to you as soon as they do appear. At the same time, we can now put our schedule up. I have a very high-level schedule here. So this is reflecting completion of our final approvals this spring. After we get our Lake County Forest Preserve District approvals, we will need to bring that back to you and also to the city. But one thing that's going on, which is a good thing, is we do have notification from IDNR that our grant application for recreational trails program has been advanced. So it's gone from IDNR agreeing to it to going to the Federal Highway Administration, which actually provides the funding. So that's a very positive step. We have not yet heard about the IDNR OSLAD grant, but that is a significant grant for $400,000. And both of those grants, we know if we are awarded them, we cannot advance to construction bid until we have agreements signed. So what we hear is that could potentially be June. But we do not know what that date is yet, but we are rolling that into our ideas of what this project looks like, and we wanted to make you aware of that fact. So that is why we're showing a summer, fall start to construction, and then following again with our anticipated River Day planting plan in 2021. I think also this year for River Day 2020 will also highlight the park with our River Day events. We can go in and do some planting. Perhaps by then we'll have some great news about grant funding and approvals for the project. And that is that.
Thank you, very exciting.
Very exciting.
Thank you very much.
Okay, platform. Smith.
Good timing.
Now the announcer should be say Jeff Smith is entering the hall.
Margaret, thank you. Drive.
Next meeting.
I'm back. One more time after this.
2 more times.
Just stand up there for a while.
I will.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so we're on to platform tennis. So as the board will recall, we recently provided an update on research staff is doing to investigate the feasibility of building platform tennis courts somewhere within the Park District properties. So at the last meeting, the board provided direction for staff to look at some of the sites that are maybe a little more feasible, the most cost-effective, but come back with a little more hard costs. So what we've done is reached out to Gaywalt Hamilton Associates engineering firm to talk to them to solicit a proposal. And so we've spoken to them, and we've broke it down to a handful of sites that we want to propose to consider. So Dan, can you go to the next? So the 4 sites that we've kind of whittled it down to right now, the first is Sunset Woods Park. And I will say that when we presented previously, we talked about Sunset Woods Park as possibly a good site because it's not in a floodplain. Some challenges that are posed by that as like the other sites. However, one of the challenges here, and we've spoken a little closer to Gaywalt Hamilton about this, is the lack of a structure that's immediately adjacent to where the courts potentially could go. So you'd most likely be building a new building, which would be pretty costly. But this is still one site that we may look further into based on the board's feelings. So can you go to the next slide? So Danny Caniff Park, it's a little hard to see from this image. It's shaded there because it's showing it's in floodplain. But this is the central location. We had recently discussed 3 locations, south, central, and north. So there are the tennis courts and the new pickleball courts. And then just to the left of those is, just above those is the tennis building. It's used for storage right now, and it's underutilized otherwise. And so the idea potentially that courts could go somewhere in this area and that building could be repurposed for the warming hut. And then there are, so at Deer Creek Racquet Club, there was also discussion about putting courts close to the building there. And then the last slide. the Golf Learning Center, there was interest in exploring possibility of something up there. So we had posed these sites, discussed these sites with Gaylord Hamilton, and they had come back and they had provided us a proposal of $30,000 to look at all of these sites. Now, what they would do is they'd go out, they would assess the sites, and they would prepare a preliminary cost opinion, and they would also prepare site concepts for those sites. And the idea here is that they would also be working with an architect firm to look at the existing structures and determine what it would take to convert those into an appropriate structure for platform tennis. So the question to the board is how we should proceed here. We talked to Gaylord Hamilton about breaking this up, maybe choosing one site that maybe seems more appealing than another site. And they said it would, depending on the number of sites we go with, it would be approximately $7,500 to maybe $10,000 per site. If we just did one site, it would be a little higher. If you do all 4 sites, it would come up to about $30,000. So our understanding right now, and this is based on very preliminary research and somewhat opinion, is that the Danny Caniff Central is probably the most ideal site, being that the location, the synergy with the tennis courts there, and then also the fact that there is a building there that, while it would need some work, significant work, it still is a building that seems like it could be appropriate to be converted into a warming hut.
Do we have to keep that warming hut staffed?
We don't have to. There are other facilities that do not staff it. Wilmette does not staff theirs. I don't believe Lake Bluff.
Winnetka does.
And Winnetka, yeah. So the only ones that do are ones that offer food and beverage service. Those are the ones that staff it. The other facilities typically, they're not staffed.
Jeff, could you put back up the picture of that site you're talking about? So,
I will say the courts were just placed there by us, give you a general idea, exactly where they would go. That's part of what Gaylord would be doing, would be talking about really how to place these.
right.
We understand the ideal is to wrap it around the building, right?
Yeah.
No, part of the hut's purpose is to watch the man.
Yes.
Right.
So if you're 60 feet away, it's,
Yeah,
without binoculars, it's not really.
These were done for the previous presentation prior to
Right,
talking to
right,
them.
right.
And so, yeah, this would be an exercise in determining how you could really achieve that goal.
Yeah.
Well, so, Jeff, obviously, if, like you said, the more locations we have them look at, the more it's gonna cost us. So, for me, the Golf Learning Center just absolutely makes no sense to me. I don't know what the consensus is on the board, but I hate to even have them waste time going there. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Why
That's my
not?
first concern. What?
Why?
Could you put that picture up?
Yeah.
I mean, I know why I don't
It's
like it.
golf. I just feel like that's not a place for it. I can see something maybe, Fink, Deer Creek, even, I love this idea of Caniff, just because it's by the courts, but I just feel it's random. You might as well put like a soccer field there. It just doesn't.
Well, I
make
mean, they
sense.
do
No
have,
synergy to me.
I agree, I don't love that either, but you do go to like a driving range and you'll see batting cages. And, I mean, it draws people, because it's a sporting area, so there's miniature golf, there's the dome, and then there's this other thing.
But the
I don't
problem-
love this site.
The problem
either,
with
I'm
this
just
site
saying.
is parking.
Like the golf.
Oh,
We don't
yeah.
have enough parking.
Right.
I'd rather see a batting.
There's
cage
lots
than
of problems
just
there.
paddle.
What?
Yeah, but anyway, I would like to see if we could narrow it down, rather than just spending money where I just not sure it'd be an ideal location. Now also, with Caniff, which is what I'm favoring, and that's just, I don't play paddle, I don't know much about it, other than it's really booming and people are really excited about it. The floodplain is gonna make it how much more costly?
I'd imagine
Because
that's
it's a
part of the
flood-
study.
Yeah,
That's
that's
part of
really
the
part of
I'll
what
let you know.
Gaywalt will tell us.
Well, but I mean, isn't that's what makes that location not ideal, right? Is that the only one that's in the floodplain, that thing?
No,
The others
yeah,
are.
Yeah.
the Deer Creek ones.
The only one that's not that we proposed is Sunset and the Gulf. Those are the only two areas that are not in a floodplain. But what Jeff was saying is that when you compare the costs associated with the engineering with the floodplain versus the cost to build a new structure. The cost to build a new structure with the plumbing and everything is going to cost more than dealing with the floodplain issue. So that is why I think the centrally located location at Danny Caniff is an ideal location, because there's already a building there.
Yeah. And Terry, you play paddle?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think this is good. If we can get it closer to that existing hut, and thus we don't have to build a whole new one. I would encourage people, right on Clevey, you could just pull off, that's what I did, and I sent Brian some pictures, is, what is that, Northmore, Exmoor, I always forget which more that is. Northmore, I think it is. You'll see paddle courts on the north side of the street, kind of by Kennedy and stuff like that in that area. If you just drive into the little parking lot, and you can just get a sense of it, it almost looks like a camper, like a double-wide trailer, is the paddle hut, but it's right on top of the courts. So people come in to get warm because it's a winter sport. That's basically people bring their own beer, whatever like that, and they have glass so you can see the games going on. And then you can see when that game ends, okay, it's my turn, I go out. So you don't have to sit down there and freeze. So that's a really good visual. They probably have a lot more money than we do, but that's what they created.
It's an exclusive club, right?
Right.
They won't allow me on the grounds.
Yeah.
You can go in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Go very early in the morning.
I don't know about that.
Jeff, what is which of the sites is most favorable to staff?
I think it looks like you want to answer.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I'll stand by what I said in regards to Danny Caniff at this point. It seems like, once again, I feel strongly about the synergy with the tennis and the pickleball there. It just all around, none of the sites at this point, we'll be honest, there isn't a slam dunk, there isn't a perfect site. But at this point, this seems to be, from the discussions we have, and I think opinion of staff based on other programming and other things happening in the different areas, that it would probably be the most appropriate. I'd recommend, if we were going to pursue only one site at this point, I would say that's probably most likely the best to pursue.
What's the turnaround time?
I apologize, I don't have that right now. I would imagine in a matter of weeks, probably within a follow-up, the next workshop meeting, we could come back with some information.
No, why don't we do this then? Why don't we give them approval to look at the Danny Caniff site, and only the Danny Caniff site? If the turnaround is just a couple weeks, then you can come back with some preliminaries in 2 weeks, or, 3 weeks, we can get it by email. Then we can make a decision if we need to look at another space.
Can I just throw this?
Can I finish?
Yes, you may, because you're the president.
Go ahead. I was
Well, what's
done.
with that? Well, because you were kind of proposing it, I was just wondering how much more, you said it's $7,500 more, but what would it be if they looked at one site? That's what I was.
So we received the proposal and asked to break it out. They did not come back with pricing if you do one, if you do two, but they just said it would be approximately this much based on the number of sites. So I will go back to them and say, and get a solid quote. But my estimation is it would probably be around $10,000 based on our conversation.
10,000?
Probably about 10,000, based on the conversations we had with them.
The one site,
Okay.
and then report back to us.
I just had a question about Sunset. So the biggest problem staff had with it was that there's no building. Is that right? Was there any concern about how it impacts the other sports or impacts the homes that are just west of it? Was that an issue when they were thinking about it? Because I see that as a very natural place to put it.
Well, so I think one of the asks, one of the goals of the staff was to look at maybe a more cost-effective location. And I think we went into this thinking that Sunset could be one. But I'll be honest, Gaywald Hamilton felt very strongly that Sunset would be the most costly location because of the building. And for that reason, they were not recommending we pursue that if we're trying to take cost in consideration. We still can go with that next step now, but once again, you compare the Danny Caniff site we're talking about to Sunset Woods, and they said at this point they could clearly tell us Sunset Woods would be more costly.
Brian?
Yes, sir.
Are we talking about 2 or 4 courts?
We're talking about 4 courts, I believe, yeah.
Well, I would say that we should keep in the back of our minds that we could start with 2 courts. I mean, I would rather do that and have a good hut than have 4 courts and have a lousy hut. Okay, it's all part of the same thing.
Brian, I don't like any of these alternatives. I don't like the process that we're going about trying to decide a location. I think we're doing this on an ad hoc basis. I think we're doing this is against everything we've done from a planning perspective, at least since I've gotten the board. When you know, we've done through the green print process, whenever we've done a major project, and this is a major project. This is 7 figures. And whenever we've done a major project on this board, we've done a thorough due diligence investigation of what, of both the demand and the area of supply. I think we're being short-sighted. I think we're doing it on a knee-jerk and ad hoc basis. And I'm frankly not in favor of proceeding with this at all. I think that if we want to we're later on in the agenda, we are talking about the green print reboot, and there may be opportunities to do this and incorporate that in the green print reboot, but I don't like this process. I don't like just trying to slap it somewhere because there might be a location, and I'm not going to support this. I'm not going to support spending any money even investigating any of these locations.
Commissioner Ruttenberg, you were nodding your head.
Rarely, but I agree with Cal to a certain extent. I think, have we seen an interest study to determine whether there really is an interest other than the presentation that was made by that gentleman from paddle tennis?
No, these efforts have been, it's the request of the board to continue to pursue
What did our
this.
survey say?
I'm sorry?
What did the survey say?
No, the
survey that we did?
attitude and interest survey?
Yes.
It was considered.
Yeah, so there has not been a direct effort to get community feedback specifically on paddle platform tennis courts. However, what I will say is that we are engaging in a series of adult programming focus groups that are going to start later this month and will continue on through February, and this certainly will be a topic that we will gauge interest on and could potentially come out of those focus group meetings, that this is potentially, that would be an opportunity to gauge the interest, I believe. But we have not done a direct targeted survey that would quantify the level of interest in the community.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sort of in the middle because at this point, I don't know that we can justify doing it, but I can see the advantage of being ready to do it. And that's why I wouldn't be remiss, and I wouldn't be against doing the study of this site without a commitment that we're going to move forward with it. And I don't think it's wasted money if we're prepared for something.
And again, I'll ask, did the attitude and interest study address paddle tennis? If so, what were the results? And if you don't know them,
Yeah.
we can get them.
Yeah, we can get them. I don't know the
That's
exact
a fair
statistic.
answer.
Yeah.
Well, so Cal said it's a 7-figure project. Do we know that? That's what I thought this was supposed to tell us.
We only know what other communities have spent on theirs, which were 7 figures, but it's very dependent upon your specific project, the land that you're building on, and whether or not you are building a new hut. So all of those, they built new huts.
Okay.
So that's why they were high expenses, and a lot of them had significant stormwater management expenses as
I
well.
will point out, I did read the material that Darren provided, and I know Winnetka, they had a grassroots organization that donated their time, efforts, and their treasure to create their program. I know that North Chicago, Lake Bluff has done something similar. If we want to move forward, I think in connection with maybe this building, in this location, because we're talking about this building a little bit later, it could be incorporated there. However, I would like to see, before we spend any money, that there is actually a grassroots, and I like Darren, and he's a good guy, and he's been very generous with his time and efforts, both with paddle tennis and AYSO soccer, and I get that, but I like to hear from more of the community that there is this actual demand for this, and I like them to have a stake in this. We had a bunch of boaters here tonight, and we were engaging with them with regard to Park Avenue, and potentially asking them to help us with the, if once a concept is settled on, help us with trying to fund that. I think that we would want the same type of buy-in with the paddle tennis, and I think
Well,
that
then let's do this. Let's invite the paddle tennis.
Here's, the issue with that was he wanted to bring big groups of people there. Our meetings just happen to fall, especially now that we've been doing it, in fall, winter, on the nights of their matches, and that's why they haven't come.
And we talked about it. I have no problem, appointing board liaisons to talk and try to gauge the demand. I'm not a paddle tennis person. My brother plays, but I don't know if there's the demand that justifies even beginning to go down that path of spending this money. It may be there, and I'm not against it. I'm not convinced that we should start spending money. We have a lot of other projects we're going to hear about. We've already heard about tonight. We've just heard about what's going on at Rosewood. We have a lot of issues, and before we just go towards the next shiny object, I think we need to take care of what we have.
I misunderstood. I thought the point of having them go out was to give us a concrete number. But if we already have an idea that it's 7 figures, and I agree with Cal, we've been working on green print for a long time, and that's why it's there. So.
Okay. I am going to suggest that we ask the paddle tennis, is that the right term? Platform tennis group to either meet with us at a meeting or set up a separate meeting so we can gauge it. And let's do that through Darren.
Staff can work to arrange something and we can report back.
Okay. Jeff, don't go anywhere.
Well, I'm not.
Solar panel project update.
All right, so this was an initiative that former interim finance director Becker was leading, and that was investigating the feasibility of solar panels on Park District facilities. So myself and current finance director, Mary Lynn Peters, are picking this effort up, and we have a little bit to update and just also provide a timeline on where we are. So once again, similar to the paddle tennis, this is something that we've been asked to look into. It is an unfunded effort at this time. However, we feel that there are various opportunities that we can take advantage of, and also timing may be right to try to pursue some of these. So with that said, step back a little bit. You may recall several months back, there was a presentation on a lease option for solar panels. And that was an opportunity where the Park District would not pay anything to have solar panels installed on a facility. And in return, the Park District would purchase energy from a particular company at an approved rate. And this is something that the Park District of Oak Park has done for one of their larger rec facilities, and they say that they do realize a savings, and it also is a easier opportunity way to get solar panels on the building. So we had explored that, and we had also looked into the possibility of simply purchasing the panels outright. And from everyone we've spoken to, that if that was a possibility from a funding standpoint, then that's always recommended. And we have.
Can I stop you right there? I noticed in your staff report, you mentioned that you've dealt with this company, Windfree.
Mm-hmm.
Let me do this. I've done work professionally for that company, so I think I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion at this point, because I don't know where we're going with this, but if we're going to start talking about a company that I've represented in the past, I don't think I should participate in the discussion. If that's okay.
Yeah. Whatever we want to do, I was just going to say, we're not making a recommendation regarding any of those companies, but it's today. I think Jeff just wants to give a timeline, but certainly if that's
I think it'd just be safe just to do it this way, and I apologize, I just realized it, but I did notice that in the staff report, so I'm just going to I'll just recuse myself from this.
Good,
just
now we
not
can get
listening.
things done, Cal.
I'm gonna go get a
You have
cookie.
a lawyer on the
Conference
board,
room.
I mean, it's like, I'm sorry.
No, you're just gonna go get a cookie in the conference room.
Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect cue for
Bring me
Wind Free
one.
Solar. So just to give a brief report, we have reached out to a number of opportunities, a couple of firms that would provide a lease option. We have spoken to Wind Free Solar about the pluses and minuses of purchasing. We are in the process right now of kind of developing a timeline because we are looking at, one of the facilities that was discussed was Deer Creek Racquet Club as an ideal location. The roof is scheduled to be replaced there. And we've had discussions with a number of individuals, and we're right now kind of determining what's truly feasible and realistic there. The majority of that roof is an asphalt shingle roof, and putting solar panels on a roof like that, you have to be permanently affixed, you have to penetrate the roof, which does open up the possibility of some issues, and it's going to require some real coordination with the actual roof replacement project. But if you take a facility like Pogo and put it on a flat roof, it's a ballasted system, you don't have to penetrate the roof, and it might be more ideal. So we are continuing, like I said, we're picking up where the work that was done, and we are continuing to look at what may be the most feasible site. We're also looking at various grant opportunities. And our plan at this point is to come with a more firm timeline of those next steps at the upcoming Finance Committee meeting and talk about funding options.
Just an update.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
All right, well, we go get Commissioner Bernstein from the cookie jar. I'm going to suggest a 5-minute recess. But before we take a 5-minute recess.
I just want to take a really quick opportunity to make an introduction to the board. We sent out an email, but Tony Maskey is actually here this evening, and this is his first board meeting, and
Welcome.
and he is our new facility maintenance manager, and this is a new position with the Park District, and he actually is overseeing all the maintenance, including the maintenance staff, the custodial staff, but also the mechanicals of all the facilities, and this is a new position. So I wanted you to have a face with the name. So Tony's here tonight, and just welcome him to the Park District. And then you can take a break.
Now we can take 5 minutes. So we're recess at 8:22.
Poor guy.
Barney, was that right of me? I'm actually doing a shareholders agreement for those guys right now.
At this point, you didn't have to.
But I just felt kind of annoying. I just realized, like, doing a shareholders agreement for those guys. Is that the guy who's really tall? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just figured he wants to go.
No, that's... You guys are leaving us? You know, you can watch the debate? You go home and watch the debate? Not enough. I've been here since 4 o'clock. What? So we get to pay the big bucks there, you know?
Everybody's motion to work project is, so everybody's what? Motion to work. Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I use it, the golf range center dog. And
Yes.
it is a mud slip and slide.
A lot of things we don't have control over.
I literally, the dogs come out like just totally covered in mud.
Yeah.
Now, I understand there's things like priority, so, but, you know, some crushed gravel up there.
I like to hear. My wife usually does that for me.
A chute, as well as maybe 25 feet in.
I have my own ideas.
My thinking is there's a good time to do that, might be as part of the project.
Oh, really?
When you're working on
That was some time back.
Yeah.
It happened in retirement.
because they'll be doing that
You know,
kind of stuff.
my thinking on Rosewood is protect the buildings.
You know, just,
Don't try to fight Mother Nature. We're going to lose that battle. You know, the Army Corps said the original design was going to be fine. It wasn't fine. And I like Margaret. I think but she doesn't know. I mean, there's so much uncertainty, and then there's, and we did a lot of engineering when that was done. None of this engineering's been done, we're doing it on an ad, like, I hate doing things that are not planned out and investigated. Who knows what the repercussions, what the consequences, if we narrow this on lateral, drift, what happens down, then we're gonna have the neighbors suing us because there's an issue down thing, because we didn't do the engineering before we did the work.
Whole space, you're just saying there's a space, there's a shoe,
Yeah.
and then there's a quarter turn.
Yeah.
Because it's expensive, just, because it's literally, who would know a lot more.
Yeah. That's why protect our investment and then call it a day and don't fight. That's why I asked the question, will we still be able to enjoy it? And he goes, even under high Lakewood, there'll still be areas for them people to sunbathe. They're just going to be smaller. Just smaller, and when the Lakewood goes down. Which is getting hammered right now, too. Yeah. I was in New Buffalo in November. We got invited, these people have a house there. They told us that half a block from their house used to be this beach. We used to go out 300 feet, beautiful beach. It doesn't exist anymore. They said they have to walk 2 miles to get to a beach now because the beaches don't exist. Can we go home? We have to do green print tonight. Good night. I'm tired. I've been here since 4 o'clock. I've had enough too. Can I go home with you? Let's go home. Let's do green print tonight, really.
That is the problem. I would have to talk to the golf staff. So let me look into it. And talk to the golf staff.
I work till 8 o'clock Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights.
Normally it's not a problem. I know what you're meaning.
I was city council until 9:30 last night.
Or it's frozen. So we
I did get up to play basketball.
So I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
We always go one high.
What are you guys still doing here?
We're just hanging out, making sure that you guys are doing the
We're voting on it tonight, by the way, at 11:30. 11:58, we're voting on it.
We're gonna go out for drinks after.
You want to, you want to ask,
Let's talk to Brian. He's done something.
Mr. Rhodes, a minute of your time.
You ready? No, question. I hate to do this. But we really do green print tonight.
I knew you were gonna say. Well, I mean, I guess we're moving forward with the plan, even like it's not approved.
Yeah.
I mean, or we could present it next, the hope was to get approval next Thursday, next board meeting.
We can't anyway.
Vote.
No, at the next board meeting.
No, we were gonna present it, put it on a consent agenda, saying that we were.
I mean, it's something that we should be talking about at 9:30 tonight.
First February meeting. January 28th.
I'm glad to hear. That's what we're hoping.
We were gonna put on a consent agenda for approval, January 28th. I can present that on the same night, it's an approval, which doesn't.
The thing is, it's something we should be proud of and we should be focusing on. Tonight we had so many other things on our agenda. I mean, what do we have in the workshop in February? Why don't we do it as a workshop matter at the board meeting with no action being taken, unless someone wants it.
Oh, do it at the board meeting?
Yeah,
No action,
yeah,
do business?
yeah. What else do we have on the agenda that night?
I'm trying to think. It's just pulling up real quick, but it's mostly consent agenda items.
Let's do it that night, because really we should spend some time on it and focus on it.
I mean, the only difference is, yeah, we'll be doing it on camera.
That's okay.
One of your questions was.
With the voters?
Yeah, just right now. The question is, if I can do a really abbreviated version for the sake of,
Can we do this? I mean, can we do a special meeting on that? Let's do a special meeting. And then we could approve it,
we can do.
Let's do a special meeting. Because it is an important thing, it is a planning thing, and we shouldn't be doing it at 9 o'clock at night. Because we have still 2 other items on the agenda tonight. Let's do a special meeting. I know it's hard to get everyone together. Next couple weeks. Let's get every, Nora, are you available next week? Special meeting?
I'm not.
You're not?
I have a trial Thursday.
Thursday?
Oh, in the day? Oh, at night? What time?
It's just tough green print.
Let me double check.
He's got a trial next week.
Tuesday?
He's got a trial next week.
Monday, it'd have to be, Monday, Tuesday.
We do it Saturday morning too.
Tuesday, we have a board meeting, like that's saying.
We do a board meeting that's like, this is on camera too, isn't it?
No, I mean, if we do it next Tuesday, I'm just saying, because it,
The special meeting tonight, that's good.
I was thinking,
you want to do it after 5?
we should really be focused on that. I don't want to do this. Yeah, then we'll find a time to do a special meeting.
What's left on the agenda?
We have the Hidden Creek, and we have the amendment to the budget.
Yes, fortunately, yes. I'm gonna bang my gavel. Good night, I love you.
What? He's a go-to. Okay.
Here, yay.
How much work cost?
This is what happens at 8:30, I start going, boop, boop, boop,
All right.
boop, boop. Have a lot of games. Tony, we want to say welcome and we apologize. But this is your first meeting. You're being, yeah, it won't be any longer than this. Well, can you imagine? He's like, oh my God, I got to be here every other Tuesday.
Where's Brian?
I think we could have.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
2 courts.
When I mentioned that,
We need Mr. Rome's.
Did I give you shit?
We have several people who were. I didn't see him. When I was out. Let the record reflect, Mr. Romes has joined us.
Okay, let the record reflect that it's 8:31. We are back on the record. We are back talking. Mitch Carr, would you please come up and tell us very succinctly about the Hidden Creek Aqua Park Pool Filtration System Project update?
I will take,
Because I
I'll take
believe
the
this is
hint.
the third time you've discussed this with us.
Seems like it's more.
What are we talking about?
Tonight, we're talking about the Aqua Park Pool Water Filtration Project update.
Happens at 8:30 for us.
Okay, thank you.
Case closed, okay. Tonight, we're specifically talking about the equipment and our staff recommendation on the type of equipment. It's not a very glamorous project, of course. It's not something that our public sees a whole lot, but obviously water filtration is a huge component at Hidden Creek. And you usually hear about things when it's not working properly. And so from that perspective, a new system is certainly going to deliver to our end project users. And so we want to just, can I control this, Dan? You said I can? Okay. So just quickly to go through the project goals. This is very straightforward. We're looking to deliver clean, safe, this cleanest, safest water possible. We have some green initiatives that are listed as our secondary goals, and obviously our project completion date of getting done by the time we open. In addition, when we went and started to look at this, there are only 2 different types of filtration systems. One is sand, which we currently use, and the other is regenerative. And just as a quick reminder, we use WT Group Engineering, so I might reference them a few times because they were...
Cal, is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm the only one who swims here.
No, I swim.
I swim.
I swim.
So they helped us significantly with this project. If you haven't seen our filters, here they are.
Oh, this is awesome.
This is the impact right here. So they've been servicing, as we've mentioned before, for 22 years. They're meeting the end of their useful life, as you can probably tell here. This picture here shows the two of them together. This is a more close-up picture. And basically, this is a sand filtration system, as succinct as possible. Basically, water's pressure comes through here, it's filtered out through sand particles, and it's pumped right back into the pool. This filter allows us to filter material down to the size of 20 to 40 microns. And to give you a kind of context, a hair is about 75 microns. So it's filtering stuff down to the, you can't even see level, which is great. But there are systems that are a little bit better, which I'm going to get to in a second. The other piece to this, keeping on the goal, the project goals, is that in order to clean these filters, we backwash them. We literally send water back up through the system and dump water out to clean out the sand. And so in that, we discharge about 7,000 gallons of water per tank in a backwash. So quite a bit of water. And we do that about every 3 to 4 days. The other type of filtration is regenerative. And so the picture to the right is the size of what the tank looks like. And this illustration here is basically how the process works. So different from sand in the way that the media is what's called a perlite. And perlite is added to this cartridge, and literally water goes through and it's filtered out, but it offers superior filtration. It gets it down to the micron level of 1 to 5. So that's a huge difference. It's cleaner, it's safer, and at that level, we're getting down to like the parasite level. What that also means is that if we have less particles that are in our water once it's been filtered, that means less chemicals that we have to use in order to clean our water. The backwash process is a little bit different. Basically, instead of backwashing using 7,000 gallons of water, every week, this whole tank needs to be cleaned or dumped out, and it's basically cleaned every hour through a regeneration process. But in simplistic form, this thing gets dumped every week, and it's about 450 gallons of water that gets ejected instead of the 7,000.
14,000.
Yes, 14,000 when you're talking 2 filters, and we're only going to need 1 filter with this new system. So staff is moving forward with a recommendation on just the system with regenerative filtration. And so that's basically based on its ability to meet our project goals better with cleaner, clearer, safer water, and while achieving green goals. In addition, we anticipate to be able to see operational savings on an annual basis with the reduction of water and chemical utilization. And some of those figures are listed up here. Some other updates. So with that recommendation, there are only 2 manufacturers of regenerative filters. They're called Paddock and Neptune. Staff and WT are recommending that we move forward to procure the equipment with Paddock Filtrix system because it uses a stainless steel interior, which will provide better longevity. And it also is compatible with our current controlling system. The Neptune filter isn't, so it would only increase cost if we decided to look at both systems. So we're recommending moving forward with the Paddock system. There's only one distributor of a Paddock system in the area. That's our local supplier, Highland Supply Company. Halogen is somebody the Park District is very comfortable with. We use them for our chemicals for our pool right now. And they also have recently distributed this piece of equipment with Vernon Hills Park District and Barrington Park District, and both of those projects were very successful. And in addition, as we were going through engineering and design, the circulation pumps were determined that they were also going to need to be replaced as part of this project. These pumps right now are scheduled to be replaced in 2022 as part of the capital plan. They're budgeted at $23,000, but at this time they're going to need to be replaced as part of this project. And that does have a financial impact. I just want to give a little bit of an update on our financial impact. Some of this is estimates, some of this are now actual costs. So we talked last time about engineering. With our total project budget of $425,000, that included engineering equipment and our installation. So engineering is an actual cost of $18,500. The equipment which we're talking about today, which includes the circulation pumps, was quoted by Highland at $235,000. And right now, we are given an estimated installation cost of $220,000. That part of the project would be bid out. It may come in less than that, it may come in more than that. But we feel comfortable with the 220 that was given to us also by WT as a good estimate as well. That puts us right now as a project overage of $48,500. With that, the part of the project overage is those circulation pumps, which was $23,000, and that, which is in 2022's capital budget, that wouldn't be there anymore. So there is a savings potentially, well, there will be a savings in 2 years. So right now, that's the financial impact, and we'll know the full financial impact once we go through the bid process on the installation. This is an updated project timeline, which gets us to opening day, so a lot of steps that are going to have to happen between now and then. Really tonight, there's no action. This is more of a recommendation for, that will come forth at the January 28th meeting, and staff is recommending that at that meeting, that the park board approves the purchase of the paddock filtrate system by sole source according to our purchasing policy.
And this is something we have to do, correct?
This is something that has been budgeted, and the system itself is it's inefficient, and we need to do it.
We need to do it.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I do. So maybe it's a statement, but in making this switch to this new filtration system, you said that we're going to have energy savings and we're going to have a very significant water savings.
Yes.
And I think those are two items alone that we need to think about and not just look at the bottom line of the project cost. Those are probably very hard. We could have an engineer tell us the energy savings cost, but it's going to be significant enough. We might, so that we just need to also consider those two aspects to this.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you, Mitch.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are going to remove item 11, the green print review, from tonight's agenda, and go to item 12, resolution to amend the operating budget.
Good evening. Good evening. While we were getting prepared for the bond issuance that is coming up in a few weeks, it was determined that the budgeted bond proceeds of about $7.1 million were sitting in the debt service fund rather than the capital projects fund. As a result, the staff is going to recommend that we make an amendment to the 2020 operating budget, asking that we move the $7.1 million that was budgeted from the debt service fund to the capital fund. And we would ask that that takes place at the next meeting on January 28th with a resolution to amend the original operating budget. And that's all I have on that. Do you have any
Great
questions?
presentation.
Yeah.
That was the best one I've heard
I
all
heard
night.
something about
The
quick,
best
so.
one, that was so nice.
And I can go quicker on the next one
I don't
too.
think
But does
anybody's going
anyone,
to top that this entire year.
No, she's going to top it on her next presentation.
wait, I'm going to try to top it with the next one.
Yes, I have reviewed the vouchers, and they're consistent with our policies.
Okay.
Wow.
Unbelievable. You're much better than Elliot.
Oh, excellent. Oh, stealing mouse. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Was that okay?
All right, I know you guys are not going to want to hear this, but can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Karen, is it okay?
8:43 show that we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Cal, Monday is Martin Luther King Day.
I can't do it Monday or Tuesday.
I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, MLK Day, Monday night.
Do you have more public comment? Come on up, we're back in session. Peter, state your name.
Peter Morty. Correct. I was fascinated with Rosewood, and I guess the best thing is a great example. Just up the shoreline is Fort Sheridan. They have the identical cove as Rosewood, and I currently dive the Calumet Shipwreck there, and I go over there underwater and see how they did theirs. And what they did there is they staggered really big rocks in the mouth of the opening. Sort of what she talked about, but she had a solid barrier. So they staggered them so that the sand can still move in and out, but yet it was still breaking the waves, you can tell. And that beach has been there for 12 years, and it's still very swimmable. It never went up or down, because we go there all the time. And it's something that was designed by, I don't know, the Army Corps of Engineers, I'm guessing, but that's just something as an example for you guys to take in, and how that worked, even to this last year. The beach was still the same, and the depths were still the same. But that's how they did their cove. It was a little bit more tighter, and they staggered huge rocks in the mouth of that cove opening, and it actually deflected the waves, like she said, but they staggered them a little bit so the sand can move in and out, and that's how that came to be. So just an example out there. It's right up on our
All right,
shoreline.
thank you. Will you call Margaret tomorrow and run that by her and see if that's an option, and if it's feasible?
Yeah, they used the riffraff, the big boulders. They didn't have like little smaller ones, but that's what they did, and we've been seeing that working great for all these years. So, just for example, so because I know a visual is better than thinking about it.
You stuck around for that?
Of course.
We gave you
I
an
gotta help. My job is to help
opportunity.
you guys.
Thank you, Peter.
Anything
Have
else?
a good night.
Move to adjourn.
You already did.
Oh,
Move to re-adjourn.
Yeah.
All right, show us, we'll re-adjourn.
Motion, second.
45.
I did the motion.
All in favor?
Cal. Yeah.
What am I doing next Friday night?
Come down, let's go to the show. So, the only thing with Chris and I is we may have to leave a little early to get back, so we're social until, and if we want to get back.
We can't go, it's okay. I'm just asking.
You ask me like I know so much. That's why I said 8:45, are we done?
No one's about, this is what we're talking about, no one's about answers.